Chabad began as a Hasidic, which is the quote-unquote mystical Jewish tradition. And we'll break that down a bit maybe later on. It's not so mystical. It's more like, it's a lot more satanic. And they drew their inspiration from this rather vile rabbi who's known universally as the Baal Shem Tov. And he has very famous encounters where he consorts and consults with demons, devils, and even Satan himself. And what world history attempts to do is they deflect from it and they say, these stories are allegorical. And from that point, he had many a disciple, including the founder of Chabad, Shnoya Zalman of Liadi. So he was well versed in Talmud, Torah, Kabbalah. But where the danger begins is that he was obsessed with settling the land of Palestine, obsessed with it. And he founded an organization called Chabad Kalel, which is the longest continuously operating entity in Palestine. It began in 1788. Talking over a century before...
Crazy, I haven't heard this.
Before Der Judenstaat, Theodor Herzl's famous book where he laid out the parameters. And this organization was getting so much money from Shnoya Zalman and this nascent Chabad organization that the Tsar of Russia actually arrested him because they thought he was an Ottoman spy.
Wow.
Because at the time, of course, Palestine was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. So the Russians, who had a historical rivalry with the Ottomans, they thought that he was running intel, even running weapons back and forth to the Ottomans. Of course, he wasn't. He was transporting money and all types of Judaica, which are materials, to these settlers in Palestine who were beginning to lay what the Jews have come to call facts on the ground, or settlements. So before there was any secular settlement in Palestine, you had Chabad building these colonies, and that would become their base. Because of the fact that they had this deep-rooted commitment, you have to ask yourself the question, if they weren't secularists, if they weren't atheists, and then of course you have the kibbutzes that came after that, which were generally socialist driven, what was motivating them? And of course the answer is Judaism. And Chabad, they originated within what we would call the Pale of Settlement, which was this Jewish hotbed smack dab in the middle of Russia and these border regions that now have been broken up into Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Poland.
Yeah.
And they were all quote unquote religious fanatics. These were people that were studying Torah, Talmud, and Kabbalah so much that they would go blind.
Wow.
And that remains true to this very day. The Orthodox Jews are 3 times more likely to go nearsighted than any Gentile on planet Earth. Yep, and it's from the Talmud study. But this is where things start to get even darker and even more despicable. They then took their own book that came from Shnoya Zalman of Liadi. He wrote a text called the Tanya, and this was, you could call it an exegesis on the exegesis, a commentary on the commentary. And he would give his own interpretation of the Talmud, of what the Jews call the Torah, of the Kabbalah. And this book was rooted in the filthiest and most deplorable manifestations of supremacism, to the point where he would write that the whole of creation, I want everybody to think about that. We're all human beings, different creeds, different colors, blase, 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 blah. Good and bad in all types of people, right?
Yes.
And yet, this individual wrote that the whole of creation was created for the sole purpose of serving the Jews.
Wow.
And even went as far as to say that the souls of Gentiles come from the satanic realm, whereas the souls of Jews come from the so-called heavenly realm, and that the differences between Jews and Gentiles are so stark that it would be the same as comparing one species of animal to another, a particular species of animal to an insect. So it was Schneerson who was merely regurgitating the slime that was written by Shnoya Zalman. And this tradition, of course, was passed on, and then Chabad began to spread, like a cancer, if you would, all over the world. First it started in Europe, and then as they began to be the central go-between for Jews who were following a lot of secular traditions, like communism, for example, that communism was very much Judaic. It was admitted in the Jewish century by Yuri Skelzin. If you haven't read that book, take the time to read it. The Jewish Century. Okay. There's so much subversion. It's presented from a pro-Jewish perspective. And, you know, there was a story a few years ago. It came from the quote-unquote anti-Zionist Jewish website, Mondo Weiss. The founder, Philip Weiss, who's admittedly, he views Jews as superior to Gentiles, right? Naturally. So everybody think about that every time you hear the phrase anti-Zionist Jew. Number one, they're not anti-Zionist for real, because they don't believe in the death of the Zionist entity. And number two, they're still very much Jewish supremacists. We're presented this image by the anti-Zionist Jews, the quote-unquote true Torah Jews, who aren't Torah Jews at all. Because, I mean, I would argue from the Islamic perspective, and I don't want to distract too much from that, but I think it's also a matter of logic. You read the stories in the Old Testament, and you see these horrible things that these so-called prophets are doing. And you can only come to two logical deductions. Number one, these are the most horrible people to ever exist. Or, number two, the Jews are lying through their teeth about what they did. That's the Islamic perspective. We believe that prophets are pure, righteous, they don't sin, and they definitely don't rape their own kids, and they definitely don't commit genocide. And then, of course, the rabbis take these demented stories in the Old Testament, they take them even further. So I would argue against the whole framework in general of them being true Torah Jews, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. Fact of the matter is that all of these Jews, my dear brother, they're all congregated in certain areas in New York, like Borough Park, Flatbush, Crown Heights in Brooklyn, Muncie, a little bit further north from the city. And they're all Hasidic and non-Hasidic, and they're all Orthodox, all of them. And you constantly see intermarriage between the ultra-Zionist Chabadnik Jews and the so-called anti-Zionist Neturai Karta and Satmar Jews. Now, if we go to Neturai Karta, who we're told are these paragons of virtue, because of the fact we see them burning Israeli flags in occupied Palestine. They do it here, in London, in Australia, and elsewhere. Here's a very simple equation. You're an anti-Zionist? How about you get the hell off the land that you're squatting on?
Exactly.
I have Palestinian friends, I know you
Palestine,
do too.
Yeah.
And these are people who have been in the Western diaspora for decades. They can't go back to their homeland.
No.
But these so-called anti-Zionist Jews, they can. Now, this particular group, Neturai Karta, that's an Aramaic phrase. It comes from the Talmud. So when we think about the Talmud and all the vile things that are written within it, and the Talmud especially, because it expounds upon the deep-rooted Jewish hatred for Gentiledom in general. You know, I quoted this on the last program, but I think it bears repeating, that according to the Jerusalem Talmud, I actually remember the passage off the top of my head, 4:11:7 in the Kiddushin tractate of the Jerusalem Talmud. It says the best of the Gentiles shall be killed. So, I mean, when you and I think of that, we think of our scientists, our lawyers, our doctors, our intellectuals, our poets, our artists.
The best of us should be killed.
Our fighters, and the best of us should be killed. So back to Neturai Karta, the anti-Zionist Jews. They say their whole title, their very name, it comes from the Talmud. And they have taught, I remember writing a piece about this 2.5 years ago. They believe that the Talmud is the word of God. Imagine that. This book is filled with child rape, mass murder, and the animalization of an entire group, multiple groups of people,
Goyim,
black
all
folks,
cattle, yeah.
white folks, Arabs,
Asians, yeah,
Asians. And the craziest thing is that a common misconception that we hear, I mean, this appears as well, but people always say the Goyim, the word that you see the most that would be the best comparison for it is cattle. It's actually not it. It's actually not it. The word is actually an Aramaic Hebrew word, and it's a corruption of Arabic. The word hamar, which means donkey. Well, the Jews say hamorim, donkeys. So that's what they view Gentiles as beasts of burden, as donkeys. We're supposed to carry their weight while they rule the world.
Wow.
And this Talmudic euphemism, it ties all the way back into each of these groups because they believe in it. So if you believe in it, we probably are not going to be able to get along. And Netzurai Kata, they're not Palestinian Jews either. This is something they love to ram down our throat. They didn't come from Palestine. Their group actually was created in Hungary, and they started as settlers. Their original conceptualization was supposed to be settling on the land of what we call Al-Quds, Jerusalem. So how are you anti-Zionist and you were part of the Zionist project from the jump? And you're South African, you're English, or whatever the hell you are. We all know you got a second passport. Hop on the plane and bounce.
Yeah.
So they're lying. And above and beyond that, something that everyone needs to know is that all of these yeshivas, these Jewish schools, these synagogues, these temples, these Jewish seminaries, they're all funded by the Zionist regime itself. So you burn an Israeli flag in the street while you take Israeli money. And again, how is it that you're so anti-Zionist? You're so anti-Zionist, but you intermarry with these Zionist groups? So it's definitely a fraud. And I would say, as we segue back into Chabad now, that through Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who is the treacherous rabbi who has really expanded the influence of Chabad over a period of decades, extending from what we know as the West to what we know as the East. What's crazy is that, I mean, these places don't have any type of Judaic history, but you find Chabad in these places so they can plant their feet and plant their tentacles, because again, this is where things get even darker. I remember a couple years ago, you and I were just talking about it before we went on air, the tunnels in New York. It came out in the New York Post, interestingly enough, that there were Mexican workers down there and other undocumented migrants that were hired by these Israelis, which is typical. Like you said, they got a problem with manual labor.
Don't like manual labor.
And you know what? Just for the record, just to defend my brother, this isn't something that is a quote-unquote anti-Semitic stereotype. It's in the Talmud. The Jews, the rabbis, they argue against the idea of physical labor, and they said that exactly. And the Jews' preferred work, they say, is monetary law or financial law. In other words, scam and goyim. Trace back the spiritual lineage that we discussed at the very beginning. You had the founder, Shnoya Zalman of Liadi. He took his spiritual dictation from the Baal Shem Tov, who had open discussions with Satan as per their own tradition. There was an amazing book called Red Mafia, spelled M-A-F-I-Y-A, written by what may have been one of the few good Jews in the world, Robert Friedman. He was a brave person who confronted...
I like Bobby Fischer, too.
Yeah, well, you know, my man Bobby, he didn't identify with the J, but it's true. So Robert Friedman, he confronted the Jewish mafia directly. And even though a lot of people say that he died by natural causes, if you read his book, they more than likely assassinated him. If you take a look at Mickey Cohen, for example, Mickey Cohen, major gangster out in L.A.
In L.A., Hollywood, he helped create Hollywood.
And he had open ties to Chabad. How about Mo Dalitz? Mo Dalitz received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the ADL. Mo Dalitz was another one, openly connected to Chabad. And considering where we are, if you fast forward to modern times, I would say that without question, the Adelson family, absolutely gangsters. No one can dispute that. And they too have open ties, their funding to Chabad. Wow. The Adelson family, and a lot of these families for that matter, some of your most powerful Zionist families in the world, they in fact are giving money to Chabad, which brings us back around to Russia, because when you look at these oligarchs like Lev Leviev, for example, who is arguably the world's most notorious blood diamond dealer. Another one is Dan Gertler, who has literally been at the forefront of the Goyicide, the mass killing in the Congo over coltan for almost 25 years now. Coltan is the metallic material that we find in these things right here.
Oh,
right?
So it's very valuable.
Your TV screens, your cell phones, your laptops, coltan is in all of it. And it has been this vile Jew, Dan Gertler, and his rival, Benny Steinmetz, who have been pillaging the Congo. Both of them are connected to Chabad. Back, you're talking hundreds of years. You hear the word, you hear the name rather, De Beers.
Yeah.
Right? De Beers. You think, it's got to be, is it French? Duh, Beers. Maybe it's Dutch, right? It ain't Dutch and it ain't French.
I'm guessing it's Jewish.
It is Jewish. It was owned by the Oppenheimer family. So, and the Oppenheimers had a very close relationship with the Rothschild dynasty. And then as we look at Russia through Lev Leviev and several of these other oligarchs, they are openly funding Chabad. And this situation with Russia is particularly disturbing because the chief rabbi is Berel Lazar. So Berel Lazar, he's had a very interesting relationship with Putin because sometimes it looks adversarial from the point of the media, but you have to stop reading the headlines.
Just like Trump.
Exactly like Trump.
And stuff.
Yeah, exactly like Trump. And don't get me wrong, because this is, again, this is probably part of a bigger and more abyssal discussion, but there is a fine line between serving the Jews and disliking the Jews.
Yeah, and some of these guys probably don't like getting punked out by them.
Absolutely. Especially you think of someone like, or Putin for that matter.
Trump and Putin, both of them, their egos.
These are big personalities, had prominence at various parts of their lives. Trump in the business world, Putin as an ex-spy and as an ex-military man, right? Being told what to do by these parasites. I don't think I've ever talked about this in public before, but I was getting death threats on a daily basis. God, they're vile people. From the JDL, from what was then known as the J.
Isn't the JDL, isn't that a terrorist organization?
It is a terrorist organization. It has been registered right here in the good old USA as a terrorist group, and yet so many of their ideologues, they continue to operate. I mean, even now, at the heart of the usurping Zionist entity, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's one of the most...
he's a disgusting, evil, vile, worse than Netanyahu, I think. It's hard as to imagine. He's just such a disgusting...
And for the record, he's not Ashkenazi. He's a Kurdish Jew. So that's something else that everybody needs to get through their head, that this is not a so-called white Jew problem. It's not a so-called European Jew problem. You hear about this so often, that all these Yahud and the Zionist entity...
Just blaming the white Jews, whatever. Yeah, I know you hear that a lot.
Exactly, and that they should go back to Europe. I hate to break it to everyone, a good amount of these devils are not from Europe.
Yeah.
A good amount of these devils, roughly 45 to 55% of them, they come from Arab, Kurdish, Iranian, and Afghani stock. So the problem,
and I don't want them in America. I know that.
Family, I don't think anybody wants them anywhere.
No.
I think
that's the truth at this point. It's like you see what they do everywhere they go.
Well, it's true. And I mean, if we could get to the dark side of the moon, and I don't think the moon landing happened, personally.
Send them out there. We'll just put them on a rocket and find out.
That's it. Can we do like some video game shit and put them at the bottom of the ocean in a biodome?
Yeah.
But, the problem in Palestine, even in the context of what we're talking about, Chabad happens to be from Eastern Europe. The Sassoon family, they were known as the Rothschilds of Baghdad. And they almost wiped China out.
For people that don't know, they're selling opium in China. China decided they wanted to ban it, and they convinced England to go to war for them so they could keep selling them opium.
That's exactly what happened. And that should remind everyone.
These are Iraqi Jews.
Iraqi Jews, it's true. And now, if that probably is ringing a bell for people, like, where have I heard that before? Probably Afghanistan, right? We went into Afghanistan.
Bingo.
After the Taliban scorched the opium fields.
The Taliban destroyed all the opium.
Yeah.
But they flourished. Then what happens? They start selling, the Sackler family start selling opium. That's my people, white people, like 100,000 a year dying of my people,
That's
you know? It's like when Io with crack, how he gets angry. It's like we had this conversation. It's like, I can get it. They destroyed his people. They destroyed my people.
Yeah, they destroyed everyone. Everyone. And I mean, funnily enough, I mean, when you look at the crack epidemic, that of course came from Iran. It came from the Iran-Contra situation, right?
That was Iran-Contra, which was...
And and it was the CIA, but also, what a lot of people don't know, the Mossad as well. And they were using the Contras, which were these paramilitaries in Nicaragua, and they were using their connections with cocaine to fund their weapon sales for black ops. And then this cocaine will get transported to South Central LA where they will cook crack.
Destroy the black communities.
And destroyed the black community. Destroyed a lot of communities.
Yeah, not just black communities, but that's who hit the hardest.
Anybody who comes from the projects, the slums, trailer parks, it affected everyone. And I don't know how many people have really taken the time to talk about this as we kind of segue into Iran, because it's important. But, you know, Iran, there was this crazy event that happened on the day the ceasefire was announced. I found it to be extraordinarily disturbing. A synagogue was allegedly bombed. And, you know, originally, Netanyahu, he disputed it, denied it outright.
Yeah.
Israel would never bomb a synagogue. And this, of course, is completely fraudulent because the Jews do what they want to benefit world Jewry.
They bomb girls' schools.
Exactly.
They'll kill Jews at the October 7th like they did.
Well, it's not just that, my dear brother. A lot of people more than likely haven't heard this either, but there was an Iraqi Jew who allegedly converted to Christianity before he passed away, named Naim Giladi. And he wrote about how synagogues, cafes, apartment buildings in Baghdad were bombed.
But it turned out it was Mossad. They were blaming the Muslims to get them to move to Israel, correct?
Exactly.
I remember stumbling across that story.
Okay. And the devil that was behind that, his name was Mordecai ben Parat. Everyone can look that up too. Mordecai ben Parat, P-O-R-A-T. And Mordecai ben Parat was a long-time Mossadnik. But think about that. The Jews had it good in Baghdad.
Yeah, they didn't want to move. They're like, no, we're good. So they started bombing them.
And why did they have it so good? Because they were money changers. They were jewelers. They were drug dealers. And they didn't want to leave, but they did. And they came to comprise a huge portion of the Zionist entity, to the point where easily the most famous rabbi in the usurping Zionist entity's history, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who famously said that all Goyim were put on earth to serve the Jews. He had the biggest funeral in the history of the Zionist entity. Not a white Jew, not a European Jew, an Iraqi Mizrahi Jew.
Was this in occupied Palestine?
This is in occupied Palestine. Over 700,000 people. So you're talking a little bit more than maybe roughly 15% of the entire Zionist entity came out for this scumbag's funeral. And it's definitely not beyond them under any circumstances to harm their own if they have to. Originally, it was reported that the bombing happened around 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, right? But then the Jewish community, they said it happened more like 3 o'clock in the morning. But now, keep in mind that, as you noted, they bombed the Minab Girls' School, murdering 168 people. 168 little girls and boys, and about a dozen teachers on top of it. And remember that this happened on day one.
This was the first thing we struck, I believe. I think that was the first missile we launched. It was like a sacrifice to start off with.
It was. It absolutely was.
It's
because
sick.
when
It
did
made me
this war
sick as
kick
an
off?
American, you know.
This war kicked off on
It
the
was
Shabbat
holiday,
before Purim. Shabbat Zakor, a special Shabbat where the Jews read passages about Amalek and how Amalek, the eternal enemy of the Jews, must be blotted out. That's why we call it...
Amalek? Who's Amalek? Us?
We are all Amalek. At various points in the Talmud, you see white folks, specifically Germanic folks and Romans, described as Amalek. Arabs and Persians are described as Amalek. But Gentiles in general, any Gentile that opposes the Jews is Amalek.
And they want to kill all of you. Complete genocide. Man, woman, child, dog.
Everyone.
Rabbit.
It is rabbit, cat, some of y'all that keep snakes and fish.
Olive trees.
That's it.
Everything. They want to destroy it all.
Everything that belongs to the Gentiles can be looked at as Amalek, and all of Gentiledom itself can be looked at as Amalek. So now remember, this is this strike that happened. This was on Passover. So again, everyone we live in America.
Yeah, it's always on these holidays and stuff.
Always.
I'm starting to notice this pattern. I'm new to this stuff. I'm starting to notice this pattern of these holidays doing
Iraq,
these type of things.
March 20th of 2003, Purim. Libya invaded on the same day, 2011, another Purim war. Yugoslavia, also right in the same frame.
Wow.
And again, my brother PKP, shout out to him again, he has noticed that also the COVID scamdemic launched on Purim. It was announced within the realm of Purim. So all these major global events tie back to this, and they always seem to have someone in the administration. How about Tony Blinken from the Biden administration? Tony Blinken, openly Chabad connected, openly Epstein connected.
Damn. Yep. And he was basically the one probably running the Biden administration. He was always over his shoulder. Biden was stumbling around. That guy was a clear moron.
You know, it's funny that in Iraq, every time that, because the disgusting regime in Iraq run by an individual named al-Sudani, total puppet of America and Israel. And he actively hunted down young resistance fighters. We're talking 19, 20, 21. Kids that just wanted to get their get back for Palestine, for Lebanon, now Iran. And Anthony Blinken openly requested from Sudani for him to stop these young resistance fighters from shooting Shahed 136 drones at American Zog bases and Israeli bases as well, and the occupied Golan Heights, Arqab missiles also. And Iraqis started putting out press statements calling him Jew, son of a Jew, Blinken. It's actually a verse in the Quran, the 9th chapter of the Quran, ayah 97, where God Almighty himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala, talks about the disbelief and the nifaq, the hypocrisy of the quote-unquote desert Arabs. And when you look at this region, Arabia, what we prefer to call the occupied Hijaz, there is no country called Saudi Arabia. Saudi is the name of a family. Maybe some of you have seen that there's this hideous and obese Jew running around by the name of Rabbi Jacob Yisrael, and he's proclaiming himself to be the chief rabbi of Saudi Arabia, the chief rabbi of the UAE.
I haven't seen him.
And you've seen this demon, you might have seen this going viral in memes, where he's like dancing with princes from the UAE. The UAE, just so everyone understands, they have something in their skies as we speak called Falcon Eye, and it was designed by Israeli intelligence. So all of these stupid folks that are going over to the UAE thinking they're going to live their best life, as the memes say, right? You're talking about influencers, boxers, MMA fighters, financiers. You say it all the time. That, I mean, if the Yahud are the enemy of God, you know, it's in the Quran. It's fascinating and enlightening, subhanallah, that there is no other group. You're told about all kinds of hypocrites and various forms of disbelievers, but the only group that's referred to as Qatlan al-Anbiya, which translates literally to killers of the prophets. The only ones that are called killers of the prophets are the Jews. So if you work for the killers of the prophets, that makes you worse than them.
You're a killer of the prophet, exactly.
And well, and that too.
When we take our country back, we need to make a death penalty. Any traitors that works for the enemy gets death penalty. I think
they have to.
We can't allow.
I mean, you know,
traitors.
you mentioned Jonathan Pollard a little earlier, and I mean, it's incredible that this person was let out. And the reason why, that he was let out was because of heavy pressure from a handful of Orthodox Jewish groups, the chieftain of which
Chabad, right?
being Chabad. And
they tried getting Clinton to pardon him. That's when they dropped Monica Lewinsky. She's a member of the tribe. A lot of people don't know this. You just start seeing the patterns everywhere when it starts flooding in.
I mean, Achi, the stories are that Monica Lewinsky was an outright Mossad spy working directly under, make of that what you will, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah,
So
that seems like the most likely scenario from what I've gathered.
I agree.
And then they gave the story to the Drudge Report, who is of the tribe.
Of course. And what's extremely interesting is that Bill Clinton did not want to sign the Iraq Liberation Act. That's why everybody needs to stop voting. Right? I don't mean to piss on anybody's parade, but
Yeah.
really stop voting.
Well-
It's a continuum. It's like a Jewish continuum. So Bill Clinton doesn't want to sign the Iraq Liberation Act.
And what was that going to do?
And that was going to give America the authority to invade Iraq. Clinton didn't want to sign it. Well, after the scandal with Monica Lewinsky comes out, guess what? He puts his name on the
I
dotted
bet
line.
they had something worse on him because obviously he was
Oh, of
really good
course.
friends with Epstein. That was like a warning shot, I think.
I agree. I agree completely. And then Bush cites the Iraq Liberation Act to go to war. You see?
It's
So-
all tied together.
So, I mean, people today, for example, I mean, there was a lot of controversy a couple weeks ago. You probably saw that, not even, it was what, maybe 10 days ago, I think, where Trump, he said that he was going to go after a journalist for leaking certain information about the Iran war. And all of your morons on the left, they started shrieking at the top of their lungs. They forget that Obama is the only one who was actually out here prosecuting journalists.
Yeah.
So he created the machinery that Trump is now tapping into to inflict his own version of
They use the
repression.